What's up, everybody? We're back.
Yeah. Hey, welcome back to the Metalhead's Journey. Hey, we've made it back around to the top 20 new metal albums list of all time. We've made it to number 13. This is Slipknot with Iowa. We'll get into the history of the band here and get right into the record. Hey, Slipknot, formed in 1995, is an American heavy metal band from Des Moines, Iowa. The band was formed by percussionist Sean Crahan.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
how I would
Okay.
pronounce that.
All right. Original vocalist Anders Kolsefny and bassist Paul Gray. After several lineup changes in its early years, the band settled on 9 members for more than a decade. Crahan, Gray, Joey Jordison, Craig Jones, Mick Thompson, Corey Taylor, Sid Wilson, Chris Fain, and Jim Root. They rapidly rose to fame following the release of their debut self-titled album in 1999. The band has released 7 studio albums, including The End so far, released in 2022. They have 11 Grammy nominations with only 1 win, and they've sold over about 30 million records worldwide.
Crazy.
Iowa, released in 2001, is the band's second studio album. This is considered to be the band's heaviest and darkest album. Their relationships with each other suffered during the recording of this and was later described as the darkest time of their career. The album is pretty successful. It peaked at 150 on the Billboard charts, but charted much higher overseas in multiple countries. The album produced 2 singles, Left Behind and My Plague. So this is the first Slipknot record that's going to be on this list. Spoiler alert, their self-titled record will be on here and a couple more albums. But a huge band, obviously, for the time frame in the early 2000s. Jonah, were you a big Slipknot fan?
Not initially. I was raised very conservative Christian, so my parents, this is one of those bands that my parents were vehemently opposed to me listening to. So I never really listened to them growing up, especially not when they came out. I didn't really get into Slipknot until much later in life, probably till I was already an adult, actually. But I mean, I like them for sure. I think their debut album is super solid. It's got like that grit and like dirty sound of like early new metal that I really like. Yeah, I didn't listen to this album when it first came out, and I think this might actually be my first time listening to it all the way through, like from beginning to end.
Right.
One of the reasons probably being that it's so long, which we'll get into more later, but it's a long album. And I think that does hurt it a little bit. It's very heavy. It's very angry. You know, you talked about in the intro that they the bandmates suffered, their relationships with each other suffered, and you can kind of tell, like, the music itself is very dark and angry and a little bit to its detriment in some areas, especially like lyrically and vocally, in my opinion. There's a lot of kind of word vomit in some songs, which, you know, it works for the genre and for what they were going for, definitely. But man, the songs that I already knew from this album, I liked, and I jammed them pretty hard. But the ones that I wasn't as familiar with, like I guess some of the deeper cuts, those are the ones that I struggled to get through a little bit. And unfortunately, there's other music in the world right now, new music that I also have been listening to. And, you know, I didn't let it necessarily taint my objective score, but it did affect my mood while I was listening to it, especially this last go around, to put in all my notes and scores and whatnot. But, you know, overall, I thought it was pretty good. The guitars are down-tuned and super dirty, bordering on messy in some places. I'll tell you what, as far as like the songs, like I said, that I do know and that I do like already, there's so many like quotable and memorable lines. You know, obviously People Equals Shit, Disaster Piece, Everything Ends is one of my favorite songs because of the chorus of that song. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, overall, pretty solid. Definitely not a bad album, but there are some high points and low points that we'll get into. Yeah.
Yeah. Jason, you're incredibly old, much older than we are here on this channel. So I assume this passed you by, just Slipknot in general.
What year was this one?
This came out.
2001.
This came out in 2001.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm starting to figure out why new metal was such a flash in the pan. Considering that it kind of was here and then it just kind of was gone, and now it's starting to get this rebirth. But this is not like something that was around for 30 years. New metal had a very short existence, and listening to this album kind of just verifies why I kind of stopped listening. I don't hate this album. It's very heavy, but timing wise, and I have it here on my notes. If this album had come out, if I had been with this album earlier in my life, I would have probably liked it. Had I listened to it at the time of its release, I probably would have liked it. But 50-year-old me today is not full of all the angst and hate that is in this album. So it doesn't resonate anymore. So most of what I was listening to is just
To be
the
honest, I don't think it
musicianship.
probably resonates with the guys who are still in the band.
Yeah.
Who are also
Yeah.
like 50.
Yeah. But for me, it's just like, luckily, at the very least, it is a very head banging style. There are lots of meandering, incoherent, just yelling. That's not even singing, which is indicative of this style, and it works from time to time with Korn. It does kind of work sometimes with like the band that we did recently, and with Fred Durst.
Limp
Limp
Bizkit.
Bizkit.
Yeah, Limp
Yeah.
Bizkit.
Yeah. I will
But
say, like, Corey Taylor
here,
adopts a much more, because without going through his whole thing, but like shortly after this, Stone Sour, which is his other band, comes out with an album, and he adopts much more of a singing voice, and that bleeds
into later albums.
Into basically
Yeah.
the album after this, which isn't on this list, Volume 3, and basically onward, Corey Taylor definitely expands his vocal range
Yes.
tremendously.
Yeah. So just to put a bow on my run through this, you're right. This passed me by. I probably should have listened to this when it released. This is actually the first time I've listened to it. It has a place, but normally I would have to say this is probably going to be with a much younger audience that hates life,
Yeah.
top to bottom.
For reference, I just looked it up. Corey Taylor's 51 years old, so
There you go.
he is your peer in terms of
Does
age.
he still hate life?
I mean, he's a multimillionaire. I don't know.
No. I mean,
how much
they were arguably successful at this point, and he still hated life.
Yes.
I don't know.
I'm just saying.
He seems to be from like recent interviews. He seems to be in a much better place now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this came out, at the perfect time for me. I was a big new metal guy, and Slipknot just wasn't my cup of tea. This is always one of those bands that I felt like I should have liked more. And I have a lot of friends that are big Slipknot fans. They're like, dude, they're coming to town. Let's go. And I'm like, okay. And we go, and I'm like, yeah, it's great. I mean, I've seen Slipknot like a few times live. I just don't understand. I don't understand the appeal of the band. I don't understand the appeal of having 9 members. Like, none of that comes through on the record. Like having 5 percussionists, you can't tell. The stage show is certainly more chaotic with 9 members, I guess. So maybe that plays into it. But oddly enough, though, I say all that, and then I say that I also owned this record when I was a kid. I was in a band called Moldy Walls, and we were a cover band. and we played, you know, we were playing the heaviest of the heavy. We were playing Creed, plus some like Godsmack and Saliva and stuff. But anyway,
Oh yeah,
so
flex
we're in this,
flex those heavy roots.
That's right. But we're in this talent show with another band, and they played Left Behind in the talent show. And I was like, oh, Left Behind. I was like, okay, I'll go check this out. So I bought the record, listened to it, and I was like, yeah, it's fine. And it just kind of stayed in my CD case for, you know, the next however many years before I eventually got rid of my CDs. So anyway, long-winded story there. The album is fine. It took me back to a time where I felt exactly about it then like I do now, which was, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with the album. But this will be the last time I probably ever listen to this record.
Yeah, same.
So,
that was my sentiment too.
So I probably have the most, well, based on your stories, I definitely have the most, like going into this, like the most skin in the game. I bought this record the week it came out. I remember my mom took me to Best Buy, and like I remember buying it, and the cashier was like, "Who is this?" Because I've sold a lot of these today. He had no idea who the band was. And my mom didn't
You were like,
really,
they're a Christian band.
my mom didn't really understand. Like, I didn't grow up in a conservative household or anything, but like my mom didn't really understand, like, and I think the cover was like foil, like kind of like holographic foil, like shiny, and there was just like this goat on the cover, as y'all can see. My mom had no idea what this was, and I just told her, you wouldn't understand, you wouldn't like it. Because I'm 2001 when this came out, I would have been 16. So yeah, I was at the perfect age. And unlike Josh, I will say Slipknot is definitely connected with me a lot more than it has him. Just that millennial, it came out at that time. I've enjoyed most of Slipknot's albums. They're not all winners for me. They have, like, out of their 7 albums, I would say I probably like 4 or 5 of them. 4 of them for sure. I will say this album was like, I do remember having to force myself to listen to it back then because, like, I knew it was really heavy and it was really popular amongst my friends, and I wanted to like it more. But I do remember, like, not liking it as much as their previous record. And going back and listening to it now, that sentiment definitely still rings true. There are just some songs on here that I never want to listen to again, not because they're egregiously bad or anything, but they're just such a cut below what I think is good Slipknot. And hot take, I think Slipknot got much better after this album. I know a lot of fans really like their first 2 official releases, more so than a lot of their later records. And I know amongst Slipknot fans, Volume 3 is usually lower on the list. Dude, I think that's their best record. And so, like, I'm just constantly listening to this and thinking, why am I listening to this and not listening to one of their much better albums? And that's kind of how I felt the entire time listening to this. It's not bad. My score is probably gonna be higher than all y'all's, but I don't know that I'm ever gonna listen to this album in its entirety ever again either. So,
who's your MVP for the record?
Man, I would say if this was any other album, it would probably be Corey Taylor, because I typically like his vocals. But I gotta go Joey Jordison here. Rest in peace. His drumming was highly influential for me as a drummer myself. When I say influential, I don't mean I'm anywhere close to his talent. I'm garbage. I definitely need lessons. But his drumming, Mike Portnoy's drumming, Lars Ulrich's drumming, like, that was the foundation of, like, when I really started to pay attention and, like, learn drummers' names. Jason, learning people's names is a good idea. But no, that's when I really started. That was the era where I started to be like, okay, I need to learn these guys' names and pay attention to who they are. So for me, it's Joey Jordison.
Yeah, I went chalk here for me. I went Mick Thompson and Jim Root. I, the songs that are good, they're very guitar driven or riff driven, and so I just kind of went with what stood out to me the most, and most of the good songs on the record.
There are
which
some
were the
sneaky
guitar
good
parts.
riffs on here.
Oh yeah, there's very good riffs. So, Mick Thompson, Jim Root for me. Jason, what you got?
Same. I went with Mick Thompson simply because, like, I gave this record probably 4 or 5 spins, and the only thing that really the drumming is good, but in some spots it kind of loses me because it's just a million miles an hour. But the one thing I always did find myself doing was bobbing along to the riffs.
Go ahead, Jonah.
Yeah, it's going to be the same. Although I am going to give an honorable mention to Joey Jordison because the three of them combined, of course, along with like the other percussionists,
Sean
the
and,
album.
I forget.
Yes, the album is very rhythmically driven. Like there are good riffs, but the riffs in combination with the drums and the percussion, like it's not melodically driven. It's not, there's not like melodies and harmonies going on. It's strictly rhythmically driven, in my opinion. And that's kind of the vibe of the whole thing. And it plays into the, the whole angry, heavy aspect of it. So definitely Mick Thompson, Jim Root, with an honorable mention to Joey Jordison.
All right. What'd you score the cover art and the album title?
I wasn't really sure at first, but I ended up just giving him like a 6. It's fine. Obviously the iconography of the goat's head and, kind of their vibe that they were going for at the time makes sense. And obviously they're from Iowa, so there's a connection there to them. Although the title track leaves a little to be desired, so I just landed at a 6.
All right.
I'll go next real quick because I had basically the same scores with similar sentiment. I gave the album art a 7, and it's only because, again, in my head, and feel free to tell me in the comments if I'm misremembering, but I do remember like the original album when I bought it was like kind of holographic, kind of shiny or whatever, and so I kind of gave it an extra point for that because I do remember the album art being like an eye-catching thing, so I gave it a 7. The album title is a 6, and it's just for the same reasons. Like they're from Iowa. This is Iowa. It's like a statement type of deal. But it's fine. Like it's like if you don't know that about the band, you're just like, I guess they like the state of Iowa or something. Like I don't know. I don't know. You honestly in that era, you probably aren't thinking about that at all. Like probably don't care.
Yeah. Album title for me, I went with a 7. I like the title. I just think it's like, I think, when you're from a more metropolitan area like Houston, as we are, you hear Iowa, and I immediately think like farms and just country and podunk and all this stuff, right? And then to hear like the level of brutality of a lot of the songs on this, I'm like, that's a cool, back and forth right there. So I kind of liked it from that aspect.
Would you have ever had an album called Texas from us? No.
Well, no. I mean, I have I have imagination. The cover art for me though is just, what are we doing? That's a 2 for me on the cover art.
All right, so I'll bring this home. Josh, I couldn't agree more. It's a goat. I gave it a 4. I know that there's some symbolism, but like, if it's me, it's going to be a goat's head with a whole bunch of shit in the background that screams heavy metal, not stuck to the side of a barn or something. And I think the title is ridiculously stupid. To Dave's point, we're from Texas. We wouldn't put an album out and say Texas. I'd be like, look, and I'm not being down on them. I love Korn, but if they came out with an album and named it Bakersfield, I think it'd be really stupid.
Well, Bakersfield's
So I
not a
gave
state,
that.
so
I gave that a
wouldn't really,
2.
that's not really a good comparison.
I
I'm just
gave it a
messing with you.
2 out of 10.
Well,
That's where they're from. So that would be them saying, naming their album that.
I know.
Sure.
Although if we did come out with an album called Texas, I think everyone would just assume that it's like a country album and there's cowboys and cowboy boots and just like whatever.
We're gonna ride our horses.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there a cowboy metal band?
I'm sure.
Oh, gotta be. Well, I mean, some would say like Pantera.
I was gonna say
Yeah,
Pantera.
okay.
Yeah,
They're the Cowboys from Hell.
that's right. Jason, what's your top tracks?
Top tracks. Whew, this is tough. Yeah, no. I have a third place, but then I have my first and second place can be either or. I don't have any honorable mentions. My number 3, Everything Ends, and then my shared number 2 and number 1. One or the other. You could slip it back and forth. That doesn't make any difference to me. Skin Ticket or Left Behind.
All right, that's an interesting top 3.
And the Skin Ticket is pretty much a Korn ripoff. So the last minute is terrible. If you cut out that part, it still ranks better than a lot of the other songs.
Okay.
Korn ripoff, huh? All right, I'll go. I have an honorable mention, and it's also called Skin Ticket. I don't Korn ripoff. I don't get that at all. I think this is actually a pretty good song on the record. Number 3 for me, Everything Ends. Jason, I thought you were off to a good start there. Just cool riffs, really good chorus on this one. And these top 2, they stand way apart from the rest of the record for me. Number 2 for me, People Equal Shit. Look, I worked retail for 22 years. People do, in fact, equal shit. And so this is like the national retail anthem, basically.
Yeah. You're not wrong.
And speaking of anthems, number 1 for me, the Heretic Anthem. Just a great song. Love it. Love the chorus. What were you going to say, Dave?
No, I was gonna say, Josh, you're a genius. I'm gonna go next because mine are very close to yours. My honorable mention was Everything Ends. My number 3, Left Behind. Surprised nobody really had that. I don't know, Jason had that.
Jason had it.
My number 2 is People Equal Shit. It's an excellent song. It's a live staple from the band to this day.
Oh yeah.
And for good reason. And number 1 for me is Heretic Anthem. I love the intro, like with the DJ. It's like 6 6 6. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And I'm like, skip.
You're dumb as hell. You're just so dumb. Yeah, those are my top 3.
Go ahead, Jonah.
All right. So my honorable mentions are going to be People Equal Shit and Disaster Piece. I really like those songs, but they didn't quite make my top 3 personally. Number 3, I've got Everything Ends. I think it's a great song. Number 2, I've got Left Behind. And then for me, my number 1 was I Am Hated. The intro riff and like the main riff throughout that song was a huge standout for me. So that's my number 1.
All right. That's cool. We had some diversity there. I appreciate that.
I think the one that was in Everything Ends was in everybody's list, wasn't it?
Yeah. Which is surprising. Hey, so the next part of the show here. So we all know as metal fans, the sweet spot for track listing is 8 songs. We all know the greatest metal albums of all time have 8 songs. So what we like to do is cut these albums down to 8 songs. This album is fucking fat and bloated at 14 tracks. So we are going to do it a favor here and give it a little tummy tuck and take it down to 8 songs. We got to cut 6 off of this.
I'll go first because
never mind, Dave. Go ahead.
Because mine is really easy. It's so easy. They almost kind of did it already.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna like literally cut everything after Left Behind. I think basically after Left Behind the album stinks. Now I could be generous and cut the first song to bring it down to 7, and then I would probably add New Abortion or Skin Ticket, depending on how I felt, as that potential 8th song. But to be easy, I'm just gonna listen to the first 8 songs and then stop listening to the album.
Go ahead, Jonah.
Yeah, you're pretty close. You're pretty close, Dave. I definitely am cutting the first track, 515. And because I really liked I Am Hated, that one's going to stay in for me, so I'm not cutting that. But yeah, so as far as the first half of the album, I'm cutting 515. I'm cutting Gently. Gently didn't really vibe with me. It doesn't really get good until like the last minute and a half or so for me. So that one's going to get cut. I am also cutting Skin Ticket. I didn't really like that song.
I didn't either.
New Abortion gets cut, Metabolic gets cut, and Iowa. In my opinion, Iowa and Skin Ticket are the 2 worst songs on the album. They're easy first round cuts for me.
I'll go here. I've got Iowa. I've got 515. I've got Gently. I've got The Shape. I've got Metabolic. And then what is probably a little bit of a controversial pick here, but Left Behind kind of sucks.
It does not.
I don't get it. I don't understand what the appeal of that song is at all. So that was probably the third easiest cut for me was Left Behind.
You know, it was funny. I didn't look this up, but when you ran through the kind of bio of the group, you said that Left Behind was their one of their radio singles. And I had written down, I was like, was this ever remade, or is it radio friendly? And I think maybe that's why, you're cutting it, because it's the one song on here that I feel like they made for radio. Which is why I think I liked it. As far as my cuts, absolutely cutting the opening 515. I'm cutting Disaster Piece. I do not like Heretic Anthem, so I'm cutting that song.
Oh,
wow.
And then I'm basically cutting the last 3 songs.
How can you not like Heretic Anthem?
Just didn't vibe, man. So I'm cutting New Abortion.
That's how you don't like metal.
In Iowa.
So I wanted to add a little bit of extra to this. So there's a website. I'm gonna totally peel back the curtain. There's a website called Album of the Year, and one of the things you can do is people can individually rate songs on there. So I wanted to see what generally people would quote unquote cut, what the 6 worst songs rated on here are, to see how close they match up with our picks. So 515 is the lowest rated. I'm not going to go in order, but it just happens to be the worst rated. I Am Hated would be cut. New Abortion would be cut. Metabolic would be cut. And Iowa would be cut. And I have to cut one more, and it is Gently.
Okay. I think I was closest.
So
yeah,
it's mostly the back half.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Left Behind has got a 9 out of 10 on there.
Listen, I get it. I understand that people like that song, but somebody's got to be smart here. All right, Dave, this is your category here. This is where we like to rate the track listing if you're going to sit through this slog and go 1 to 14. So Dave, what would you rate this track listing?
Okay, so because I would just this in totality, this track listing sucks. It is not divvied up well, in my opinion. I think it is super front heavy, which, given the era that this was released, I don't know that was an accident. That could have been just completely on purpose, because again, this was the pre-download. This was like, downloads were still a thing with Napster and stuff, but like, there wasn't streaming services. People were still just buying CDs. So I think you kind of felt like you needed to front load it a little bit. But it sucks. I gave it a 4 only because it's front loaded. I can literally just stop after the 8th song and be done with it. So it's still bad, but because I don't have to manually skip here and there or like build my own playlist, I can just hit play and then stop after Left Behind. I gave it a 4.
Yeah, I I gave it a 1. This is one of the
Yeah.
worst track listings I think we've done on this show since we started ranking track listings. I just I hate the way everything flows together. If I were going to ever listen to this again, it would be my 8 songs kind of cut up the way I would want to do it. But this was a tough listen just from a track listing standpoint. I listened to it straight through a couple times, and then I just jumped around after that, and it was a much more enjoyable experience just jumping around.
It
Go ahead, John.
it feels like the new Dream Theater album came out, and it's longer than this in terms of runtime, but this album feels so long. Anyway,
I mean, not compared to that one, but
when I was listening to it like in the background, like Jason and I like to do, it was fine because to its credit and maybe detriment, some of the songs kind of sound samey when they're background music. So when it's background noise, it's fine. But when I'm actually sitting and listening to the whole thing, it's definitely a slog. So for all the same reasons that Dave and Josh already gave, it's going to get a 3 from me.
All right. Track listings to me are not a big deal. So what I do is I just basically give it a rating based on the scores that I give the songs from start to finish. This this listing kept me going because a song that I really disliked, the next song would be better. Then the song after that would be not better, and the song after that would be okay. So it kind of just kept me going until you get to the last 3 abominations. So I gave it a 5.5.
all right.
Okay.
Which is probably going to be your score. All right. Hey, we're on to the last category here. This is where we like to give our score for the record. And just give you some context, for a lot of folks out there, an average score would be a 7. Well, for us, it's a 5. So anything we give various levels of 4.9 and below, that's various levels of we would not recommend the record. Anything 5 and above is various levels of we would recommend it. And anything 9 to 10 is really like all-time classic area.
Legendary status.
Yeah, I usually like to predict who's going to give the worst score. Jason, why don't you go first?
Yeah. Look, I was on the fence for this album on whether or not I would even give it a recommend. Just because I will never listen to this again. I will never listen to any of these songs again. Honestly, none of it will bring me back. The other flip side of that is the fact that if it's background music, it's perfectly fine, and there is an audience for this. It's just not me. It is 14 to 24-year-old me. That was half my life ago. So I gave it a 5.4.
Wow.
It's not as low as I anticipated. Now I don't know where to go next. I think I'm going to go next. I think Jonah's going to be higher than me.
We'll see.
Look, all the things we talked about already for the record. Look, I listened to this one more time this morning while I was working out in the gym, and dude, as a gym playlist on like shuffle, pretty good. I wasn't hating it. But look, outside of Heretic Anthem really being like just the absolute best song on this record, and a song that I've listened to since this came out. There's not much here for me, but I think there's, to Jason's point, I think there's an audience for this. There are some songs that I get it. I understand the appeal. I came in as 6.
Okay.
I feel like Jonah's gonna have a higher score than me, or sorry, a lower score than me. So
Yes.
I'll have Jonah go.
Yeah. Jason, what did you give it again?
5.4.
5.4.
Wow. Who would have thought, huh? So yeah, I've pretty much voiced all of my criticisms, I think. And because of the way I score, again, there's a lot of math involved. The good stuff that's here is good. And if I were to rate this album with my cuts and it's just the 8 tracks, this album gets a full 2 points higher for me. But because it is the state that it's in, I landed at a 5.3.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
All right, I misread that.
I am the highest,
I'm not the worst.
but not by a whole lot. And I think part of it is just there is some nostalgia berries here.
Sure.
And there are some genuinely solid tracks. Like I do think if this album was like, if I was ever going to revisit this album, it would not be the album. It would be like, 5, 6, 7 songs that I would actively try to listen to. Because there are still live staples on here that they play. But hot take incoming, I look at this record kind of like the first System of a Down album, whereas like, why would I listen to that when there are objectively better albums from this band to listen to? So
What a bad take.
it's not. It's not.
To compare this to the first System record is just...
No. I'm using the comparison, meaning...
Yeah, no, you used them both in the same sentence. That's asinine.
You're stupid. Anyway, I landed at a 6.3. I think the good songs are good enough to revisit. But I, as a whole, like, this record is whatever. So that brings us to a 5.75. So I'll round up since it's what's
I feel like that's pretty accurate.
We're
honestly.
we're close to a 6. So for a 6 for us is considered an album rated 6, has more positives than negatives, and generally delivers a good listening experience, though it may have noticeable flaws, inconsistent tracks, or lack originality. It's worth checking out, but only with tempered expectations. I would say that's probably right for this record. I mean, if you're a fan of nu metal, this is probably already in your catalog anyway. But if you're trying to dip your toes into nu metal, this would not be an album I would put to start with. This would be like a deep cut if you've already kind of running out of albums to try to listen to. Maybe you dip into this.
We've talked about it with some of our genre lists, like which albums would we maybe consider like required listening for the genre.
This is not it.
This is not one of those. I would
No.
say their first album is much more aligns with that than this one does.
Yeah. I just based on this listening experience and my memory of their first record, I predict a much higher score. For their first record.
Here's a take. I've never listened to their first record. Not once.
But you've heard the hits at least.
Are there hits on that record?
Yes.
There's a couple.
There's probably at least 3 songs from that record off the top of my head that get played live probably every time they play.
Those are probably the times I check out. All right, well, hey, if you also checked out while we were doing this video, then go ahead and hit the like, hit the subscribe. We're putting out weekly metal content right now. We got metal reactions, metal reviews, metal time machines, metal brackets, and all kinds of other cool stuff. And hey, in the meantime, live long and prosper.
Take it easy, everybody.
Later.
Peace.